All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your host.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa, and we are back with the first Shiver of the new year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes, I hope everybody, let's see, we are on the 5th, right? So 50% of New Year's resolutions have already been broken. People out there smoking and drinking again already?
I never started mine. I'll put it that way. So I'm giving myself till the 7th to say, you know what? I had a week, so let me pick it up there.
Yeah, I've had to stretch the kind of start date on mine because my getting back to school, it's getting back into a workout routine and stuff like that on top of getting my regular morning routine is a bit much. And then my daughter's birthday was yesterday, so I was like, well, I'm not gonna start eating healthy before I get cake and ice cream. So
there's no point,
right?
Yeah, you're setting yourself up to fail.
Exactly. So you stretch these things.
Yeah. Yeah, much like my waistline. So we welcome you back. We hope that you all had a very nice holiday season. And this is the time on Shiver when we really like to start saying, well, what are we going to discuss? Because we're through the holidays, right? Because October, we've got plenty of Halloween themed movies, right? November, we're still kicking that holiday thing. And then, Christmas, there's always Christmas themed horror.
Yeah, exactly.
So now it's like, okay, what are we going to do? How do we set the tone for Shiver? Let's call this season 3. Right?
Sure.
All right. Why not? I guess we could discuss the logistics of that later. I'm just throwing pasta at a wall and seeing what sticks,
It's an effective method for finding out whether or not it's done.
It is, actually. My wife hates it, but I have an awful lot of fun. And then she says, but I was cooking dinner and we weren't having pasta. And I said, who says I was cooking dinner?
just throwing pasta at the wall. This pasta's done. I didn't say we need it for dinner.
Precisely. So Daniel, this was your idea, and I think it's a good one.
Yeah, it was. It's funny the way that this kind of came about. I was actually out doing some Christmas shopping, and they had like a display set up. And I was like, oh, man, I should get the new Candyman movie. And then it was like, then I kind of forgot about it, went about Christmas shopping and stuff like that. But then I got home and was looking for something to do that night. And I was like, no, seriously, I should watch the new Candyman movie. And so I watched it and I was really excited. We'd already had kind of December planned out. So I was like, all right, well, give Dave a chance we'll get through this, give Dave a chance to get through Christmas and he can get a chance to watch it too. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about it because I've been ready for it since I saw it back at the beginning of December.
So few are the times that I've seen you this excited about something, which is why this is going to be somewhat of an awkward episode.
Fair enough.
So this movie is, I don't know if this is a new trend because I remember back with Halloween H2O, they did this where they were like, hey, we're retconning the mythology here, and we're ignoring the last what was it, the last like 3 or 4 movies, and it's only going to be a sequel to the first one, right? And then Resurrection followed that, and that was a shit show. And so they brought that same thing back with Halloween 2018, right? They did the same thing with Texas Chainsaw Massacre a couple years ago, maybe 10 years ago. Maybe it was more at this point.
And they're doing it again now, I believe, with
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, maybe this year.
Yeah. So this is definitely something that that's been done, to some extent. There is horror aspects. It's not a horror series, but the Terminator did this with Dark Fate recently. So I think there is a trend right now, even if it isn't something that has started now.
Superman Returns.
Yeah, that's another one. And actually, I think that's a really underappreciated movie.
I agree.
I don't think it's a particularly good one, but it's not as bad as everyone says it is. That trend of saying, hey, you know what, we're just going to ignore the shit in between. Although I do think that there's a lot of good in Farewell to the Flesh, even if the movie itself is not a good one.
Yes, that's a very fair statement.
Yeah. So this one is a direct sequel to the original Candyman, builds on the lore of the original Candyman, expands on that lore. How does this hold up as a sequel to the original Candyman? And how does it hold up as its own movie?
So when I watched this, I was pretty sure that was the premise, was that, this was a sequel to just Candyman. And so that's kind of where they were going with it. What they did a really good job with this movie was establishing that Helen Lyle existed, and that her time in Cabrini Green was real. But then they did a lot to cast a lot of doubt on the story of Helen Lyle. Like one of the very first things that we see is, or not the very first thing, but one of the first things we see is is a character, and he decides to tell a ghost story, and he tells the story of Helen Lyle, which is bits and pieces of the original Candyman, but with everything horrible that happened in that movie attributed to Helen Lyle doing it. And so you spend a lot of the time in this movie trying to figure out, is it like a sequel, or is it like just a massive retcon to what happened in the first one? They eventually reach a point where you very much learn, okay, no, this is a direct sequel. Everything from the first Candyman is canon, and it moves forward from there. And at first I kept like waiting, right, to see my Candyman. And so that kept throwing me for a loop, because I like just trying to figure out if it was a sequel. But once the big domino fell into place of the concept that Candyman is not one person, Candyman is the whole hive, and it became much more than just a ghost story. It became a very important piece of a culture. It became something that was more than just, a scary story to tell in the dark. It became the story of a protector. Oddly enough, this movie turns the idea of Candyman away from just a slasher into a golem of sorts. Not your traditional, like made of material and then brought to life, but something that shouldn't be alive, that is alive, that is now serving as a protector for a certain group of people. And that fascinated me. Like I was absolutely blown away by that concept. And then so from that point forward, I was all in. I really enjoyed it. I think they did a good job. Exactly what I said when I was done with this movie was they did a great job of paying homage to where they came from while creating their own story. And that's what, it's so easy to create one of these sequels where you're not creating your own story or creating anything new. You're just telling the next chapter. Right. This very much told a new Candyman story while acknowledging the brilliance of the original Candyman. And that put me over the edge on liking this movie a lot. I think that it did a good job with all the sequel aspects. Some of it did feel a little unnecessarily shoehorned in, and I get that. But overall, I liked it. I think it worked as a sequel / reboot.
I agree to an extent. Um, I do like somewhat the expansion of the mythos of Candyman. We get a lot more exploration
Right.
into kind of why Candyman exists. And I feel like for me the one area where this movie really left me feeling wanting was how on the nose it was. The original Candyman is a masterclass in subtlety and nuance. Like the Candyman episode that we did last year to kind of commemorate this one being released, where we looked at the original Candyman. We spent a lot of time talking about the social commentary and talking about the artistry of that film. And I think that although this film is beautiful, like it is gorgeous, and the music is great, um, a lot of what made the original so good was missing here, because it was preachy, I
Okay.
guess,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's kind of what I mean by it was on the nose, and it's relevant subjects, and it's all the same stuff that we were shown in the original Candyman, uh, but in a way that felt like I was being spoon fed,
Yes.
and I understand that that is an issue today with movies. Um, I don't know if audiences are dumber, but I really think that studio execs believe
Yeah. They're
that
at least treated as
audiences are
if they are.
dumber. Yeah, and so I kind of felt that way, where I understood the concept of gentrification bad, right? I've seen it myself here in Miami. There are certain areas where they were once predominantly black or predominantly low income Latino, and it's not that way anymore.
Is it because craft breweries opened?
And craft breweries open, artists came in,
Yes.
galleries opened up. It's exactly what you see there in Cabrini Green. And and the more this happens, the more unaffordable housing becomes, and the more these disenfranchised people end up suffering. So I got that. Like you didn't have to show me that. The fact that this takes place in the same location as the first one, and it looks nothing
Right.
like the first one, you don't need to tell me this. And that's something that I feel happened throughout the entire movie, where I was kind of spoon fed what the message was instead of me going on this journey of discovery with it. I didn't think about this movie after
Right.
when it
Yeah.
was.
And it did get overly expository
Mhm.
quite often, where you weren't just left to kind of figure stuff out. They very much were just like, okay, well, here's what this means and here's what that means. And I can absolutely see that aspect of it. And so, yeah, now that you say it like that, I do. I didn't really think about, like, as soon as you started talking, I was like, man, they did spend a lot of time like defining things.
Yeah, the other thing that for me kind of took away some of the mystery of that original Candyman was you were never really certain if Helen committed those atrocities.
Right.
When she woke up, she was just in a pool of blood, right? But there was nothing left up to interpretation in this one. We would see Candyman taking over overpowering the other person, and no one was there.
Right.
So we knew that there was a spirit of Candyman that was, I don't know, maybe not strong enough to materialize yet. That's why we would see it in the mirror, but not in real life. Not until people started saying the name. Now I did think that as preachy as it was, to make it relevant, this idea of, say my name, tying in with, the Black Lives Matter movement, and like people like Breonna Taylor, where you'd see the protests and people would chant, say her name.
Right.
That was powerful. It was powerful and empowering to see that on screen. So it's not like, in my opinion, it was all, negatives. I think that there's a lot of really powerful imagery here, but a lot of it was, I think, very much on the nose. And to me was, if this was a standalone thing and there had been no Candyman previously, I would probably be watching this and saying, you know what, that's pretty good. And that's kind of the Jordan Peele way. He doesn't mince words. He puts all the cards out on the table, and he lets you know exactly what this thing is about. Get Out is like that. Us is like that. And this is very much a Jordan Peele movie, even though he didn't direct it. It was Nia DaCosta, and I think it was beautifully directed. But I don't know if it works as a sequel to Candyman. With all of the style, the substance that we had with Candyman. I think a lot of that was used really just as like a jumping off point.
So as we start to talk about the story and we look at the plot, there are obviously a lot of similarities to the original, because of the fact that they were expanding upon it. So when you start to think about looking at the story as a whole, the mythos that was already created and how this built, do you think that the story itself that they told in this movie, like just the plot of this movie, the story of it, was it strong enough to kind of stand on its own? Or, how does it help or hurt by the fact that instead of creating a new idea for a monster that could be part of Cabrini Green, they built upon the idea of Candyman?
So I think this is one of the weaker areas in the movie. To me, this did not feel like a complete sequel. To me, this was a DLC to the original Candyman.
Okay.
And I think part of that has to do with the runtime. This clocks in at like barely over an hour 20.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not one of these people who thinks that you need to have a terribly long movie. In fact, I often shy away from repeated viewings of movies that are too long, simply because if I want to sit down and watch something in one shot, the chances are slimmer and slimmer as the years go by.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have enough time to watch something that's 2.5 or 3 hours long. I loved Infinity War, and I loved Endgame. I haven't seen them again, maybe once or twice for Infinity War, certainly not for Endgame, and these are amazing movies. I'm a huge comic book fan, but I could tell you that I've seen The Bride of Frankenstein, which is like maybe 80 minutes long, like a bazillion times, right? I think this movie suffered for it. I think that a lot of the ideas that it had were never fully formed or fully developed, because there's a lot of really good ones there. I love the idea that we're seeing the original baby Anthony grown up, and the plans that Daniel Robitaille, that Candyman, had for him. And I love the idea of how no matter what you try to cover up the history with, the history will still be there. You can try to ignore it all you want, but it's still there. And I think that that's something that's really relevant, particularly with what's going on today in America. People so against critical race theory, where they're like, oh, well, listen, you're just teaching kids to hate America. No, we're teaching kids history,
right?
And that's the sort of thing that I think it's really important. It's a really important message. But I don't think much is really fully developed. The story kind of seems to like just go in circles and meander a lot without ever. When we reached the final act in the church, I thought this feels like it's the end, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I felt. And William Burke was for me one of these characters that seemed really interesting at first, and by the end of the movie was my least favorite character, not because he was a bad guy, or was he, depending on how you want to look at the message of the movie,
Right.
but because his motive was never really made clear. There's you can kind of guess at it, but the real reason for why he wants Candyman to come back, I mean, he gives you a little bit of a speech, but to me that's not motive enough for Candyman, for him to really want Candyman to come back. How did he know that was Anthony, the little baby from the fire? There's all these things that to me are not answered, and where I don't really need to know how the Emperor is still alive in Rise of Skywalker. There's certain things I don't need to know.
Right.
Like I didn't need to know how Boba Fett survived in the Sarlacc pit. Things like that. I don't need to know. I feel like that's an important plot point, and you should fucking explain it. Okay. And because that's not something supernatural. That's like, okay, well, how did you know that was the guy? To me, there's a lot of little things like that simply weren't explained, and with maybe another 15 or 20 minutes, I don't know if there's a director's cut of this out there.
Right.
If one day we get an extended cut of this movie where they flesh some of that out, I think that we have a vastly superior movie.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right in the fact that while there are certain parts of it that were just kind of beat over the head with in the beginning, then it's almost they reach a point where it's like, okay, we need to start wrapping this up. Like everything's is happening, and it's like they realized at a certain point that they had just kind of just walked in these circles to create these moments that then the bow that they tried to tie on it was not as neat as they hoped it would be. That being said, I thought that I loved Billy Burke's character. I love his monologue in the church. For me, it explained like just enough. Like I can see where I didn't even think about him not until you said it. I didn't even think about like how could he have possibly known that this was the boy from Cabrini Green, when he just met him in his laundromat, and when he met him walking around like the old projects and then brought him to his laundromat. So thinking about that now, yeah, that's a little weird, but this Billy Burke kind of took on the role of a do whatever it takes anti-hero, and I know that's not the right word, but it's really the only one I can really associate with him. Where
it kind of is if you consider that a lot of people had forgotten about what Candyman represents. That pain and suffering of Black America.
Yeah, and so his speech and his do whatever it takes kind of attitude, just I mean, watching him saw Tony's hand off just
that
so
was
he
brutal.
So he could he was like some of the details have to be specific, so he had to give him a hook and some things like that. As far as the plot of this movie kind of standing on its own, I really enjoyed what left me confused at the beginning, where when we first meet Billy Burke, he says, to me, Candyman was, and he tells the story of somebody that from when he was growing up in Cabrini Green. And so then you're left scratching your head. Like, no, I thought it was Robitaille. Like, that's Candyman. What does he mean to me? Candyman is. And so, but as that developed, I ended up really, really liking the idea of the fact that it's like, well, yeah, no, I mean, generations and groups of people can have their own Candyman as long as these certain criteria are met, which is why I kept landing on that idea of Candyman being less of less of just a slasher and more of a golem. because it has to meet these certain criteria. And so I liked the idea of him of them introducing another Candyman and then eventually a third when it was all said and done. But then also mentioning the names of people who were also Candymen and
Right.
and kind of throwing all that in there. I think that honestly, if you were to if you had never seen the Candyman from the 90s, and then I really think the only thing that would be lost on you when it comes to this movie is how fucking cool the cameo at the very end of this movie by Tony Todd is.
Yeah.
Like if you're into Candyman like we are, then that Tony Todd thing was just amazing. If you'd never seen the original Candyman, then you're probably just going, I guess that's just one of the other people that he talked about, one of the other people that he painted. And so that I think makes it to where I definitely believe this movie could stand on its own. Like if I would be willing to watch this one with if somebody were to be like, oh, I was going to watch that new Candyman, I'd be like, well, you should probably, if you like movies from the 90s, you should watch the original one first. But if you just don't have the time or it just doesn't interest you, there's a complete story here. And so, whereas I guess like when you look at the Halloween from 2018, that one, everything that happens in it is dependent on what happened in the original Halloween. This one, there is a standalone story, and maybe that's why he went, like you said, it's just Jordan Peele's way, but maybe that's why he went so heavy-handed with the explanations at the beginning, because he had to start to think about appealing. He had to think about appealing to an audience that didn't have the experience of watching the first one and being able to just kind of take that all in. So I can see maybe why he did that. Whereas, we've seen the original Candyman as many times as we have, and we can wax poetic about it and enjoy kind of how it's washed over us for almost 30 years now. Right.
It'll actually be 30 years this year.
Yeah, that's right. It was,
which is crazy to think about
that. And so, or 92, but so it's interesting to me. I think the biggest, most successful thing about the plot of this movie, about the movie itself, was the fact that this was its own movie and it had ties to another, but it did enough to explain the original that you weren't left completely lost.
And the way that they did that, I thought, was brilliant. The use of the puppet light show, was really, really great.
It really, really was. And then to carry it through the credits and not only kind of retell what happened in this movie, but show the stories of some of the other people that he mentioned that went on to be part of the Hive. It shows,
which, by the way, many of those are historical.
Yes, and I did look that up, and yes, there are those are real names of men that were lynched and killed unjustly, and so. There's a lot here, and it's interesting because it is so short that they got so much in there. And you're right. I do believe that it would benefit from another 20 minutes of maybe fleshing out a little bit here and there. But I think that what they did with what they had, with what they put as the final product, I thought was really, really good. And I was along with Tony for this entire ride. I've never really thought of myself as an artist, and not just like that, like that media, like actual like painting and drawing and creating and things like that. Right. It's just, and I think part of that is because it's never been like an essential part of my lifestyle as a whole. Right. I've created tons of podcasts and been on a lot of podcasts. Like I've done a lot to create things in the world, but it's never been like an essential part of my being. And so I really enjoyed the getting to kind of suffer with Tony in the beginning And I really liked seeing him be inspired when he went through the old Cabrini Green projects, and when he talks to his girlfriend and he says, I've never been more clear. Like, this is the most focused I've ever been on a project. And I really loved seeing that rise. Like, one of the coolest moments in this film is right after the death of the art dealer, and it's on the news about what happened. And Tony's so hyped that they not only mention his name, but that they say the name of his art.
Right.
Like, it doesn't even faze him that the news story where his name and his art are getting out there is about a brutal double homicide.
Not the kind of thing you want to be linked to.
Right. But he doesn't even care, because people recognizing his creation is such a vital part of his being, that that as things progress, he obviously begins to find, I don't, maybe a little regret in bringing this back into the world, as he starts to smash mirrors and things like that.
Right.
And he's desperately trying to keep his girlfriend from saying Candyman. But it was just really, I think they did a great job of portraying this idea of the tortured artist, in a way, in a horror movie, not just a movie about a tortured artist. Like there's plenty of those. Leaving Las Vegas, right? Like, oh man, that's a tortured artist, right? But we only got to see the end, the decline. It's like, oh, he's drinking himself to death. Okay, I guess that's what it is to be a tortured artist. But this, this idea of watching through somebody's struggle and seeing that their brief moment of seeing their vision realized is what brings about not only their demise, but the demise of so many people around them, whether or not they deserved it, a story for maybe later. But I was so kind of wrapped up in just the character of Tony and his growth as a person, him learning so much about himself, about where he grew up. That was fascinating to me. And that part of the plot really sold the movie for me, was really feeling like I had a chance to understand Tony, and just the focus being solely on him pretty much the entire movie. There are not very many scenes that do not involve Tony or do not happen, directly after Tony was somewhere.
Right.
And so, he was just watching him and trying to kind of see what was happening through his eyes really took this movie to another level for me.
That makes sense. And he was fantastic. He was really great. And I think I'd
attempt to say the actor's name, but I will just massacre it. Abdul Mateen is his last name.
Yeah. Black Manta.
From
Aquaman.
Morpheus in the new Matrix, if you haven't seen it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Yes.
Don't plan on seeing it either. I'm just being honest.
It's too long, but you know what? They blow a lot of shit up. They have some fun with it. Neil Patrick Harris, spectacular in it, by the way. Sidebar, just Neil Patrick Harris in the new, spectacular.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So maybe I will. Maybe I will. One of the areas that that is a standout here, as much as I kind of harped on it for being, a little on the nose and a little preachy, is the social commentary. And this is something that has always been at the heart of Candyman. I think without it, all you have with Candyman is a run-of-the-mill slasher. But with the social commentary, it kind of elevates it, and in truth tries to elevate the whole genre to something else, right? And I think this achieves something more than just a simple monster movie, right? So for this movie in particular, how's the commentary woven into the story, and how does that commentary work?
So like you said at the top, the commentary at the beginning of the movie is bludgeoning. It's it's very in your face, and they lay a great foundation for not having to necessarily beat you with it as hard later in the movie. Whereas the first Candyman addressed gentrification a little bit. It was more about the divide between like ghettos and the areas that build up right next to them. And we talked about the first one being gothic in using the idea of Cabrini Green decaying as death. This one, I kept trying to find a way to be like, oh yeah, this one's gothic too, but it's very much not.
It isn't. No.
And so, but when you look at the social commentary,
in fact, I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no,
that's established with the very first shot.
Yeah.
The fact that you get the flip shot, like the alternate shot of the opening scene, right? The opening scene of the original Candyman is that looking down upon the city with all of its dirt and its grime, and it's very much establishing like this is urban gothic, right? We get the complete reverse shot here, from the city point of view, looking up at the skyscrapers, up into the sky. This is a totally different kind of movie. It is not going to be the same. Don't expect the same thing.
Right.
I should have seen that right from the beginning, and been like, I just thought of it as like, oh, what a cool callback. They're doing the opposite thing. Nice. Yeah. And didn't realize it kind of meant a little more than that.
And so when you remove that element and you're left with just the social commentary, what I found fascinating was as much of a just awful person as she was, the art the critic who Candyman ends up killing. Yeah, I believe so. When you first meet her, it's at the art show. And Tony pours his heart out about what he honestly feels like is his first passion project. And I believe they said it's been about 10 years since he started creating the art that was like the noose with all the stuff around it. Because I believe the guy says, this is the Tony from 10 years ago. I need the Tony of tomorrow. Right. And so he's finally found it. And then what does she do? Not only does she shit on his art, but she shits on him as a person. And it's like, and then like shits on the idea of gentrification and creates this counterpoint that is, for as much as people talk about gentrification being bad, the same people who run their mouths about it being bad also prey on the people who are actually affected by it. And that, I think, was that one little kind of, like monologue that she has about gentrification was honestly one of the most poignant things in this movie to me. And just like how we joked at the beginning, you said you'd seen gentrification. I said, and then craft breweries open. That was so poignant in the fact that a lot of the times the exact same people who complain about gentrification are the people who end up now suddenly finding themselves in the areas that have been gentrified, at least at the beginning of the gentrification process. Once you reach like now we've got a Pinkberry and Whole Foods and stuff like that, then those people start to pull back. But it's that artsy crowd that is always drawn to those areas. That's why I always feel like every time somebody's like, hey, have you heard about this new craft brewery? And then I look it up on the map and I'm like, well, in 5 years, that'll be an area where people will be hanging out to do all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a really poignant commentary on the people who complain about gentrification. And I'm not saying gentrification is a good thing, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's just always interesting to me how the people who are loudest about it, your artsy types and your hipster types, they are the ones who also thrive in that environment. But and they don't thrive in it before it starts to make the turn. They're the stories of the Clash living in an actual super shitty area and that becoming what brought out of them the amazing artists that they were. those types of stories don't exist as much anymore because of the fact that people found out about those areas. And so before you have a chance to get your break and still be in that area, or because just so many artsy people live in this area, it seems to me like there's more often a turn in the area before there's a turn in the product that comes out of that area. And that one moment was equally as damning to me as the very lengthy explanation of gentrification that we got at the beginning of the movie. And so that social commentary I thought was spectacular. I just love the idea of Candyman being a monster for the disenfranchised. And so to use the names of real lynching victims and to make this historically something that maybe makes you raise an eyebrow a little bit. And if these are stories of people that you've never heard and you end up researching some of them, I mean, it's just gruesome. Here in Alabama, we have, and I haven't been yet, unfortunately. I haven't had a chance to. We have a lynching museum in Montgomery, just to kind of make people understand that this is a part of history. And it's one of those things where you see lynching in movies, and it's a powerful tool when used correctly. But this did a good job of just kind of making you aware that, these things are happening to people whose names, before people's names were in the news. There were plenty of people who were shot in their cars during routine traffic stops before Philando Castile.
Right.
But, now in the 24-hour news cycle, we know these names. And I think that the part of the deepest part of this social commentary goes back to that idea of what you said. Candyman's new motto being "Say my name," which makes sense for Candyman because that's how you bring him about. But also by him existing, you are, if you find out about Candyman, then you have to read the story of Robitaille, or you've got to read now the story of Tony and all of these other people that are mentioned, and it becomes an educational tool. So. Candyman's out there.
It certainly was for me. I read up on one of the stories that happened in Texas just in the late 90s. And I was like, geez, I can't believe that, just 25 years ago, this was still happening. Stuff like this. I mean, we still see it in the news. It's still happening. It's important, powerful stuff.
Yeah, and so I think they did a good job of keeping this a socially relevant movie while also making it timely. And I think that really boils down to just the fact that gentrification is at the heart of this. And you are absolutely right. It was a genius move to create him a catchphrase and "Say my name." I think that part of it, while yes, it was over expositioned at times, I do believe that part of the movie was executed very, very well.
The other bit of social commentary that I thought was equally as powerful and also really well timed. This movie was completed, ready to go before everything shut down in 2020. The woman's name is Brianna.
Yeah.
And you cannot hear the name Brianna anymore without thinking Breonna Taylor, particularly when you're talking about social injustice in particular for Black Americans. There's just no way you don't draw those lines. And her character was written, acted, filmed, edited, all before what happened to Breonna Taylor. And so at the end of the movie, when these cops are, manhandling her and they're telling her, this is what you're going to go away for,
right,
if you don't do what we say, that was that was crazy. And to see her take control of the situation and summon the Candyman, knowing that she would be under his protection, that was something that both confused me because of the way that we understand Candyman to behave, but also I think ultimately was a strong point.
Well, and I think that the takeaway from the way that Brianna summoned Candyman at the end was she became the first person we saw summon Candyman that wasn't a fuck around and find out situation. Like she was
she was invoking his protection.
Yes, exactly. Like she wasn't just doing it to prove that he wasn't real. Which, you know, and especially after watching this one, we learn now that, you know, apparently there is almost a Freddy Krueger aspect to, you know, the believing in Candyman gives him power aspect. And so it was, I think that Brianna summoning him in the rear view mirror of that cop car was really the first time where we saw somebody summon Candyman in a way that wasn't disrespectful. It wasn't just like, oh, wow, watch me do this. This is nothing. You know, I mean, honestly, even Tony did it in a way that probably was disrespectful. We eventually just kind of find out he wasn't killed because he was part of this lineage. He eventually did come to respect Candyman, but when he summoned him in the glass of that sliding glass door, there was no respect to what he was doing there. He was bullshitting. He was joking around. You know, like they do a good job of being hey,
we do see the reflection of the Candyman appear at that moment. So, you know, he was there influencing the events from that time, from that, you know, like you say, you know, fuck around and find out time.
Yeah. And so, you know, while they do, you know, they do a little decent job of being like, hey, these high school girls suck. You know, maybe they don't deserve to be murdered, but, you know, they're terrible people. But at the same time, from Candyman's perspective, what they did was very disrespectful because they were just you know, they were doing it as a goof. And you know, from his perspective, that's really all it takes.
Yeah. I agree. You know, for me, it just the social commentary did get in the way of the larger mythology because we had never seen him behave this way. So we have to kind of assume that it's because she did it, that she like called on him with reverence and with respect, you know, because we don't know that Billy Burke's sister wasn't doing it in the same way, you know.
Very true.
All we know is that they're just saying Candyman in the mirror, you know. I don't know. To me, it seems like a proper assumption, you know. I don't. It's not too much of a step in logic to think that, but whenever a movie starts to play loosely with the rules of its monster, that's kind of a moment where I take a step back and I'm like, okay, what exactly is going on here? Like when Freddy Krueger started possessing people in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, you know, and then we never saw that again, you know, and when Jason had like the little worm parasite that would you know, possess people in Jason Goes to Hell. You know, again, real cool, but this never happened before. It didn't happen again after. And then there's also this idea that like it kind of seemed, at least to me, like Anthony was being possessed by Candyman.
At least when he was painting, and at times, there definitely seemed to be.
It wasn't like what turned him into Candyman was that like immediately like he's an innocent man who has died sort of thing, you know. Like what his body is becoming like necrotized. He's like becoming entranced in painting. Like there was this transition at least to me, there was an outward transition. Maybe on the inside it wasn't there, because with Helen, who does become a Candyman of sort at the end of the original film,
Right.
she just blacks out and she doesn't know what has happened, and this adds to the mystery of the original movie. But there's never a question that she's possessed by Candyman.
Yeah, I can see that, and I guess I guess they leaned, and that was one area where like I said, they did lean a little heavy on that idea of him being the baby from the first one. And I do think that while that was an interesting little throwback, and I was like, oh my God, there's Vanessa Williams, except for it's only kind of a surprise because her name was in the credits at the beginning, right? So I knew she was going to show up eventually. But I can't see that because, like I said, I think that making him baby Anthony from the first one really just kind of gave them a Deus Ex for certain things, and so I can't see that kind of getting scapegoated more than being an important plot point. So we've talked a lot about the things that Candyman does to protect his community, to be a story, but ultimately what Candyman does is Candyman kills people. 17 people in this movie, to be precise. So with a body count, the 17 is a decent body count. You go back to the history of the slasher, there's like 4 in the original Halloween if you count the babysitter at the beginning. I mean,
and no blood.
Yeah. Well, this movie definitely has buckets of blood. It definitely has deaths in 17. So when you look at the gore of this movie, how do you feel it contributes to the overall feel?
I was extremely disappointed. This was possibly the area that to me was most disappointing, because at the very least, if there's a movie where I'm not certain if I like it or not, if the kill special effects are really good, I'm like, oh man, that was really cool, right? There's a lot that you can make up for with really cool kill effects, right? It's part of the reason why Tom Savini is the fucking god that he is because whether it was a good movie or a bad movie, when you saw Tom Savini's name in special effects, you were like, oh, we're in for a ride, right? And there were definitely buckets of blood. You didn't see any of the actual kills, at least not up close. And every single time I was left thinking, I really wish I could see what the fuck was going on here.
Right.
Because they were all either off screen or they were like, the camera was so pushed back. Like I really think that the kill in the art critic's apartment was really cool, except I couldn't see a fucking thing.
All right.
Because it was so far away, it looked like one of those establishing shots from The Dark Knight, just before Batman, fucking parachutes into Shanghai. Like, what the fuck, man? I want to see her die. You know, this is what I came for. I came to see Candyman fuck up stupid white people. All right. And I felt like I was gypped in that department. The bathroom scene could have been one of the greatest, absolute greatest, most brutal scenes in any horror movie. And we were robbed of that. Absolutely robbed of that. When we saw the blood start to come down off the counter, I was like, oh boy, we're in for something.
Yeah, I was so ready because it comes down in like a sheet. And I was like, oh, that is so bizarre looking. I was so ready. And then they cut to a news story.
And it was kind of set up in a great way, because the first death is really great. You see her throat slit open and there's nothing there. And it's like, oh shit. And it comes out of nowhere, right? Like, it's going to happen, and yet it still gets you. And then with the second guy, it all happens off screen. And then it keeps happening off screen and keeps happening off screen. And I know that this is DaCosta's vision, She wanted to make something that was her own and something that was not going to be like the original Candyman, because in every possible way, this is not the original Candyman.
Right.
And I think that the movie suffered for it.
I really agree with you here. This was my biggest knock on the movie was we got blue balled, for lack of a better word, by these kills. We kept seeing awesome remnants of what we can only assume were awesome kills.
Yeah.
And like I've used the phrase less is more a lot on this podcast, but it's not a phrase that I want to use when I'm talking about a slasher flick. And you're right, especially when we do see an invisible hook tear open the first girl's throat. And it's like, oh, hell yeah, buckle up. These people know what they're doing. Let's go. And I think that they really hogtied themselves with this idea of the fact that you can't see Candyman, right? You can see him in a mirror, but it seems like it would have been an easy. There were always mirrors around. It seems like you could have just had a camera pointing at a mirror and at least shown us more than what we got. There were some good special effects. Like I said, the sheet of blood coming off that bathroom counter, that was gruesome and really cool. I want to see how all that blood came out of a person at one time. Like I want to see, and that's just the horror fan in us. And it's what we come to expect when we're watching a slasher film. And I can see where they are trying to, kind of elevate things and make it more than just a slasher film. But Candyman's a movie monster, and we want to see the monster kill the girl. Like that's why we buy tickets, right? So while we got the idea of a lot of really great kills, and we did get some good gore, the blood splatter when her throat gets slit, even him getting his hand cut off, it did show just enough. I didn't need blood to spurt everywhere. I got a good tight shot. Also a really great angle from underneath, like looking up at him, just looking up at Billy Burke, just frantic. As he cuts the hand off, and then the sound of snapping it off. Like
that was a great one.
Yeah, there were bookends here of some really great special effects, and just everything in the middle was, left up to the imagination. And that's just not what I want from this type of movie. You can tell, you could have told the same story while also creating iconic kills. And that's something that you're always on the lookout for. Over on our other podcast, Geekmore, check it out at geekbro.net. We've done like horror movie kills and like ranked them and talked about some amazing things. And, and some of them are from good movies. Some of them are from bad movies, but they still make for moments that people are going to sit around and talk about. And the original Candyman, we didn't see a lot of the kills, but damn, when he slashed open that doctor, we saw that shit. Yeah, we watched him slash open that psychiatrist.
They were conservative with the kills, but when the kills happened, they laid it all out on the line for you. There was no question about what was going on, and it was buckets and buckets of blood. By the time everything was done, they had to have been swimming in this blood. That scene where Helen is first taken to the police department after the Rottweiler's head is cut off, and she's stripping for the police officer. Her clothes is literally caked onto her body with blood, and that was missing here. It was missing here, and
the bathroom scene, just, you were right, had a chance to be this amazing moment. Like there were 4 girls in there at that point because one bailed, so it's like that you could have done a lot there and it would have been incredible. But the biggest disappointment for me came from seeing what was like the coolest prop in the movie. And that was seeing that Billy Burke had created lollipops with razor blades in them,
Yeah.
and he's lost his mind, and he's calling them sacrament. And I'm like, this, oh God, he's gonna shove one of them in her mouth, and he's gonna bite one, and this is gonna be incredible. And we get him kind of holding it, and then we get him later with a bloody mouth, right? Like he ate it. Like we didn't get a really good scene. I wanted to see somebody eat a razor blade lollipop. I wanted that to happen so bad. They looked so cool for something so simplistic. And just this, and like I said, and he just kept screaming, calling it sacrament. I was so on board with how cool these razor blade lollipops were going to be. And then they just didn't show it to me. Again, we just got the after effects of it. I wanted 1 7-second brutality, just brutally awful scene of watching him with that lollipop. And it was like, you're absolutely right. For all the blood and for all the gore that was in this movie, this is one of the times when I've got to look at the movie and be like, it wasn't used well. They could have done so much more with the gore and told their story and made it exciting. And like you said, it's director's vision, and that's not what she wanted, but man, it's what I wanted as the viewer. And I was just kind of left hanging on that one.
Yep.
So, just for all of these things considered, it's come to that time where we're going to rank the movie, right? This one's, a little bit shorter, but it's because we don't need to spend all the time talking about the social commentary in the movie. They pretty much told you exactly what it's going to be.
Right.
So when we're looking at ways that we're going to rank this movie, we like to remind everybody that we always rank a movie against itself. So, while we have referenced the original Candyman, and I'm sure it's going to play a little bit into our points, we are technically only rating it against itself. And coming right on the heels of what I was talking about there, we are going to rate this out of a possible 5 razor blade lollipops, because while they were not used as well as they could have been,
what a great prop.
Why they were absolutely not used as well as they could have been, it was such a simplistic and really cool looking prop. So out of 5 razor blade lollipops, what do you give Candyman from 2021?
When I had finished watching the movie last night, I had no idea. Usually I finish watching a movie, I'm like, okay, it's going to be somewhere around here. And as I wrote up the show program today, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going 3. And then I was like, man, but you know what? That's really low. And we started talking about the movie, and you made some interesting points, and I was like, maybe I'll go 3.5. And then I remembered how much blue balls I had with the Gore. and I was like, you know what? No, I did not see myself. I can't say I disliked the movie. I definitely didn't dislike it. But there's no way that I saw myself not liking the movie like this.
Right.
I was like, okay, I love Candyman. I enjoy Farewell to the Flesh. It's a celebration of Candyman. How am I not going to love this thing? And I didn't love it. And I don't think I liked it, and I don't think I disliked it. Meh would be the word I use. Today, our buddy Andy Chacon, guest on the show, asked me what I thought of the movie, and I said meh. And I think that's the perfect way to do it. However, I do think 2.5 stars is too low to go, because that I would definitely recommend someone watch the movie.
Right.
If they say, should I watch it or should I not watch it? I'll tell them, go ahead and watch this thing. Especially if you are unfamiliar with Candyman, or if you're a young person. I think that young people would appreciate this more than we would, simply because it's so timely, and it speaks to what's going on, in their generation, and where Candyman is kind of sort of, it's definitely not a time capsule.
Right.
I do think it's somewhat timeless because it feels like we talked about this. It feels like an early Universal monster movie, but it also feels modern, and it still feels modern and contemporary. This one does feel like it is a product of the 21st century and 21st century problems. And for that, I would recommend it to young people particularly. So I can't say 2.5. So I think 3 is right where I feel comfortable. And I may watch this again just to see how I feel upon a second viewing. I'd like to watch some of the behind the scenes just because that's illuminating, and sometimes getting into the filmmakers' heads helps you understand the decisions that they've made, and sometimes that makes me feel better about the decisions, and sometimes that makes me hate the decisions even more. But it's always nice to know.
Yeah.
So I'd say 3. What about you?
So when I watched, so I've seen this twice now, and when I watched it the first time, I was enamored with it. And upon second viewing, I realized that part of the sheen for this movie for me was just the way that they ended up tying it back to the original. Once I wasn't, surprised by Tony Todd's appearance at the end anymore, and some things like that, it did take away from it a little bit. Like I said, I do have to knock this movie a little bit because of like we said, just getting blue balled by the lack of kills. So I've got to knock it a little bit there. That being said, and I also think you're very right in the fact that like I would if if a 20-year-old or something were to come to me and ask me about Candyman, I would recommend this to somebody who was 20 over one from the 90, over the one from 92, right? So there's definitely some ups and downs, but when it's all said and done, I did really like it. I thought that they did a lot of things very well. Just like I said, the concept of Candyman being a hive. Candyman is an idea.
That is really cool.
And I did really, really like that. Billy Burke, just like, God, man, just whenever he was talking, like I was glued to him. Whenever he was telling any part of the story or going on his insane rant at the end, I was just affixed. I couldn't look away. This concept, he says, but pain like that lasts forever.
Mm-hmm.
And just that addition to the Candyman mythos is what is going to put this at 4 razor blade lollipops for me. Because I did really, really like it. When the first time I turned it off, man, I was ready to jump on here and give it a 5. And but this is one that I did on second watch. The thing is, when you watch a movie the second time, you're looking for nuanced things. This movie at times is so unnuanced. Is that a thing? That on the second viewing, you're like, okay. There's it didn't have the same effect because when I was looking for more to it here and there wasn't more to be found because this movie does present itself so wholly in the beginning. And so I'm going to sit this at 4 just because of the fact that on rewatch, it did lose some sheen and I wanted to see more kills. So yeah, I'm comfortable with leaving this at 4 razor blade lollipops.
All right. And I think this might be the one that we have disagreed upon.
I think so. A full star between us.
Yeah. A full razor-filled lollipop difference between us. That's crazy. So there you have it. Candyman sits comfortably at 3.5 razor-filled lollipops. And that'll do it for this episode. Make sure you join us for the next one, where we will be talking about the Hulu original. I think it's an original.
I think it's an original too. If not, it's just that's the first place it's getting released.
Which is original enough for me.
Yeah.
And it's called We Have to Do Something, right?
And if you were listening right now and you're like, I don't know if I'll watch that episode next week because I haven't even heard of that movie, just go watch the trailer. And if you like this show at all, I guarantee you, once you see the trailer to We Have to Do Something, you're gonna want to watch it by our episode next week.
When you told me about this trailer, like, you got to watch this thing, I was like, okay, cool. I watched the trailer and immediately got back to him like, we have to do an episode on this. I haven't seen the movie yet. I'm gonna watch it some point later this week and prepare, but it looks damn good.
It looks, it's one of those trailers where there's a lot going on and you don't know what any of it is. And it's a very well made trailer. We can say right now, at least.
Yeah. At the very least, there's that. Like, motherfucker knows how to cut a trailer.
Yes.
Pay that guy more, whoever that is. So thank you so very much for sticking with us till the end here. We hope that you're listening to some of the other podcasts on the Geek Bro Network. Mount Geekmore, I think it's taken a little bit of a hiatus.
Yeah, everybody's schedules have been wonky with Christmas and everything. I'm sure we'll settle back into a groove here, but yeah, just with Neary being out and everything going on with Christmas, it's just been hard to pin everybody down. But I'm pretty sure we'll be back soon.
But you can find Daniel DeBona and myself on that one. You can also catch Neary, who's a host on that one, on the What's Up Bro podcast, which is live right now. So if you want to jump on over there, you certainly can. You can also catch Comedy Fitness, Dose of Ellie, Seasons, a TV podcast,
Kickflix,
Crimacopia.
Pedro, let me tell you.
Yep. I like to think of Crimacopia as our sister podcast.
I 100% agree. I
think I'm going to start saying that. Crimacopia, our sister podcast.
And so if you head to geekbro.net, you can check out all of those things. Or if you head to shiverpod.com, that'll take you to our website, you can then get to the rest of the Geek Bro stuff. But all of it's under that umbrella. All of their information can be found everywhere. If you're looking for just us, we're at shiverpod on everything. On Instagram, you can even email us at shiverpod@gmail.com.
And we always respond.
Yeah.
It might be a week later, but we respond. Unlike Enterprise Rent-A-Car, I'm going to go on a little rant here, right? Unlike Enterprise Rent-A-Car, who's going to leave you stranded at Hanscom Airport in Lexington, Mass. All right, Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We waited for 3 hours. There was no one at your counter. Thankfully, your boys at Logan Airport were able to fix us up once we spent about $60 Ubering over there. And we're still waiting for a call back from management from that 1-800 number we were told to call. And the email that I've sent has still gotten no response. So if somehow this gets to Enterprise, I'd like you to know I'm very displeased, and I am making it my personal crusade to nail your asses to a wall. So Enterprise, do yourselves a favor, look in a mirror and say Candyman 5 times. Make me happy today. All right.
Love it.
So on behalf of all of us here on Shiver, fright you very much.